Hi, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Our devotion for today, July 10th, 2020, is from the book of Acts, chapter 19, verses 21 through 41. And again, we have a mob situation. Sin agitates the mob so that more sin may abound. And friends step in to prevent someone from making a really horrible decision. Do you have somebody like that in your life? Let's hear our devotion, our scripture reading for today. Verse 21, Now after all these events, Paul resolved in the Spirit to pass through Macedonia and Achaia and go to Jerusalem, saying, After I have been there, I must also see Rome. And having sent into Macedonia two of his helpers, Timothy and Erastus, he himself stayed in Asia Minor for a while. About that time there arose no little disturbance concerning the way. For a man named Demetrius, a silversmith, who made silver shrines of Artemis, brought no little business to the craftsmen. All right. So we have a little background, but then we hear of a troublemaker. Troublemakers are everywhere, aren't they? The deadly sin of greed causes all manner of trouble for everyone, and greed is involved in this situation. Those who are greedy and those who are victims of greed are, affected by the ripples of the sin of greed. So greedy people are a particular troublemaker that taps into everyone's desire to have more possessions, more wealth. Demetrius has it in for the way. Verse 25, These he gathered together with the workmen in similar trades, and he said, Men, you know that from this business we have our wealth. And you see and hear that not only in Ephesus, but in almost all of Asia, this Paul has persuaded and turned away a great many people, saying that gods made with hands are not gods. Okay, so here we're going to get to it, right? Paul is a dangerous man who threatens the livelihood of the idol makers. Well, that's true. He does. And Demetrius wants to stop Paul for the good. And for good, he wants to stop him for good, and he wants to stop the gospel he preaches about the one God who is not made or carved by human hands, and who stands in the way of all the other false gods who are made and carved by human hands. Verse 27, And there is danger not only that this trade of ours might come into disrepute, but also that the temple and the great goddess Artemis may be counted as nothing, and that she may be even deposed from her magnificence, she whom all Asia and the world worship. So here's the fear that the unbelievers have, the fear that as they're found out that they make objects that are false gods, that they make objects for folks to worship and buy that they can't really do anything, that the people will then stop buying those objects as they turn to the real God that Paul talks about. And what'll happen if nobody buys what they're selling? Yeah, they'll go broke. Well, Artemis is a well-known false god, and the market for idols for her is big. Big, big, big. And it's all threatened by Paul. Verses 28 and following. When they heard this, they were enraged and were crying out, Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. So the city was filled with the confusion, and they rushed together into the theater, dragging with them Gaius and Aristarchus, Macedonians who were Paul's companions in travel. But when Paul wished to go in among the crowd, the disciples would not let him go. And even some of the Asiarchs, who were friends of his, sent to him and were urging him not to venture into the theater. So the marketplace becomes the scene of a near riot, okay? And then it's moved into the theater area, and as a huge riot, and over the potential loss of business. Paul desires to get right in the middle of it, and probably try to help those two disciples that were being grabbed in and dragged in through the chaos. But Paul is prevented from moving into that by others, by disciples who care about him and people who are imploring him not to get involved. They're fearful for him and for his safety. And thank God for friends who won't let you do stupid stuff, right? Like walk into the middle of an enraged crowd just itching to hurt you. Do you have friends like that you can count on in your life? Friends who would try to stop you, who might confront you and try to keep you from doing something stupid, something dangerous, something that might threaten your future. People who want you to be safe and will try to do anything to keep you safe, counseling you so that you don't make these kinds of stupid decisions. Thank God for them, right? Where would we be without people like that? Verse 32 and following, now some cried out one thing and some another, for the assembly was in confusion, and most of them did not know why they had come together. Some of the crowd prompted Alexander, whom the Jews had put forward, and Alexander, motioning with his hand, wanted to make a defense to the crowd. But when they recognized that he was a Jew, for about 2 hours all they cried out with one voice, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." So they weren't going to listen to anybody who wasn't just yelling, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." No matter if they were on the side that wanted to have Paul arrested or if they were on the side that wanted to defend Paul. So this riot went on for 2 hours, probably none of them wearing masks. Nothing good, as I've said before, can happen in a mob. Only bad things happen when we have mobs. Just look on television today. Nothing good happens when there's a mob. Verse 35 and following, and when the town clerk had quieted the crowd, he said, "Men of Ephesus, who is there who does not know that the city of the Ephesians is the temple keeper of the great Artemis, and one of the sacred stones that fell from the sky? Seeing that these things cannot be denied, you ought to be quiet and do nothing rash. For you have brought these men here who are neither sacrilegious nor blasphemers of our goddess." All right, so a man in authority in the town calms the people and points out that the ones that they've dragged along into the theater have not committed blasphemy. They have not been sacrilegious. You remember, it's Demetrius who is stirring all these things up, not the disciples. And the town clerk offers them some wise advice. Listen, verse 38 and following. If therefore Demetrius and the craftsmen with him have a complaint against anyone, the courts are open, and there are proconsuls. Let them bring charges against one another. But if you seek anything further, it shall be settled in the regular assembly. For we really are in danger of being charged with rioting today, since there is no cause that we can give to justify this commotion. And when he had said these things, he dismissed the assembly. So now the onus is on Demetrius and the other craftsmen to lodge a formal complaint and have it heard in a court of law, rather than have it resolved in this mob. Anything else will be settled in a regular assembly, following law and order and peace protocols. And then the town clerk dismisses the people and sends them away. And guess what? They go. The town clerk obviously is a man of reason and bravery to stand up to the mob and get some law and order. I wish we had politicians today who would be more like this town clerk, who stood up to the mobs and said, no more. There's proper avenues for this. Go home. Don't you wish that? Go in peace. Serve the Lord.